Hi everyone, my name's Scott. I'm the founder of Arclett and I'm 10 years alcohol free, and today's video is going to be about my experience of not drinking over the past decade. And I just want to caveat that by saying I'm not anti-alcohol, I'm pro-choice, and my decision to stop drinking was about being the best version of myself. It wasn't about being better than anyone else. So I first became sober curious around 2012 when I started to get really bad anxiety after drinking. And at the time, a sober lifestyle wasn't really visible or attractive because there was no low and no alcohol. There was no sober curious movement and no dry January. So my drinking would have been seen as the norm from the outside. I was in my early 20s, I went out most weekends with my friends, and I had, boundaries in place. I'd never drink the night before work because of my job. I'd rarely have hair of the dog. I wasn't someone who loved, drinking shots, but I really struggled with the consequences as I got older. The main consequence for me was just a hangover. My drinking wasn't so much about waking up thinking, oh God, what have I done the night before? It was more what I was missing out on the next day. And the consequences as I got older became less and less worth it. And at the time I would have been sober curious. That term didn't exist then, which it does now, which is amazing. But I often felt judged and misunderstood because people would say to me, well, why would you want to stop drinking if you've not got a problem? And the consequences for me just weren't worth it. The consequences might be worth it for other people, and that's fine, but they weren't for me. I felt quite lucky to discover two things at quite a young age that really gave me something to look forward to instead of drinking. And the first one was photography. So I picked up a camera and was inspired by outdoor photographers and that outdoor lifestyle. And I started to regret spending every weekend in bed hungover when I could be out taking photos and exploring. And the other big catalyst was discovering fitness. I fell in love with the bodybuilding lifestyle, and bodybuilding and fitness was incompatible with hangovers. So I went from drinking pretty much every weekend, sometimes both nights, over the next couple of years from around 2013 to 2015, only a handful of times. And the only reasons I drank on those occasions was to people please, because it would be a birthday, and I didn't feel like I had the confidence at the time to say that I was never drinking again. So what changed was in 2015, I went traveling to Australia. And I told myself that I wasn't going to drink when I was there because I wanted to experience the trip, have more money. I didn't want to be hungover. And when I arrived in Australia, in Sydney, I ended up going on a night out and had a couple of drinks. It wasn't a problem. But the people I was with invited me on another night out. And when I went on the second night out, somebody said to me, "Are you not drinking tonight?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Why?" And I told them, and they said, all this no drinking, it needs to stop. You need to knock it on the head. You're not going to have a good time. What's the point in coming all the way to Australia if you're not going to drink? It's going to be boring. I just remember thinking, hold up, I've just arrived the other side of the world. I've got a full year ahead of me. I want to be able to experience as much as I can. And you're telling me I'm going to have a bad time if I don't drink. And the whole reason that I wanted to go traveling was to expand on my outdoor photography. I wanted to see the world, have these experiences. And I knew that alcohol was going to be a barrier for that. So I didn't have the confidence to say that I was never drinking again because of the stigma attached to being alcohol free. But I said, okay, I can take on a 1 year no alcohol challenge. And after I'd completed the 1 year, I said, I'm going to do another year. And once I'd completed 2 years alcohol free in May, I went to Norway to celebrate that. I then committed to lifelong abstinence, and I'm now 10 years alcohol free. So my experience of traveling without alcohol was amazing. I had a skydive, I learned to scuba dive, I had an aviation lesson over Sydney Harbour. With the money that I saved from not drinking, I was able to visit Dubai, Bermuda. I extended the travels and lived in America for 3 months. And it was really, one of the best times of my life. And at the time, one of the things that I struggled with was the peer pressure around and the stigma around going traveling, because anybody I knew who had been traveling before would do that lifestyle where they'd party up and down the coast and just get drunk the whole time. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to take photos, and it was no coincidence that that year was where things in my life really started going well for me. So after I returned back from New Zealand to Sydney, I had a photo commissioned in Condé Nast Travel, which was in GQ magazine. Whilst I was over in Australia, I got a job at one of my favourite brands, Patagonia. And one of the main reasons for working there was I just wanted a career break, but I knew that a lot of the people that I worked with would be into the outdoors. So we'd go on surf trips, camping trips, climbing trips, and that was really a way of trying to show to people that you can have fun without alcohol, and sober travel doesn't have to just be, you know, sitting at home every night while your friends are out. So the biggest challenge over the past 10 years has been trying to find other ways or other positive forms of escapism, because alcohol was something that I looked forward to every weekend. And the big change for me was when I discovered photography. And I remember going to Switzerland on a solo trip, and I took a photo of a sunset over the Eiger. I remember getting a huge wave of dopamine, and I think that was my way of realizing that you can have fun without alcohol. And working in drug and alcohol treatments, I understood how addiction worked, and I understood why I craved alcohol. The biggest barrier for me was the stigma attached to being alcohol free or being labelled or simply choosing not to drink. In the UK, the alcohol use spectrum is, on one end of the spectrum, you've got sobriety, which is seen as bad, and it's heavily stigmatised because it suggests you failed to manage your relationship with alcohol, or you're boring for doing something different. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got dependency, which is seen as bad because you've had to reach out for support, and that's heavily stigmatised. So by that logic, the only part of the alcohol use spectrum that's seen good and normal and accepted is if you drink. But if you drink, there can be many consequences attached to that. And I think what's quite hard is alcohol's the only drug in the world we need to justify not taking. It's highly addictive, and society tells us we should do it to excess, but if we don't do it, we're seen as having a problem. So I feel like a lot of people struggle to navigate that because you have to explain why you're not doing it. And I've often felt judged and misunderstood and labelled when I've told people why I don't drink. It's important to share over the past 10 years that life has been hard at times, and I've had to learn new ways of trying to deal with stress. And for me, that's generally been neglecting the gym and eating more junk food. And I get it, like everybody needs a vice, everybody needs a form of escapism, and it was rather that than alcohol. But I think it's important to say that, you know, if you are sober curious or you're wanting to stop drinking, you might not have a honeymoon period. It might actually be harder in the start because you've lost a coping mechanism or a form of escapism. It's also about finding it is what you want to do and what it is you love to do. And like I said, I feel quite lucky at a young age that I had these two things that I was desperate to do. I was desperate to get better at photography and learn how to be a photographer. And I was always desperate to get into the gym every night and lift weights. And those two things really gave me something to look forward to instead of alcohol, and replace the high from that. And there was never any downside to pursuing those two things. They gave me something back, whereas alcohol always took away from me. Life's obviously changed quite a lot over the past 10 years because now I've started a family and I have a daughter, but I want her to live a similar lifestyle to us. So we take her everywhere that we go. I really want to have her experience as much of the outdoors as possible and live that lifestyle. One of the most important things for me, and I think what I value most, is just waking up present every weekend and looking forward to spending time with my family, and whether that's just going to a local coffee shop or whether it's taking my daughter out for the day with my partner or whether it's coming here. Family time is like the most important thing now, and the weekends are generally quite slow. There's no chaos, there's no late nights, hangovers, feeling anxious the next day, regrets of what I've maybe spent like on a night out. It's just more about just being present. So we do prioritize the outdoors as like a form of like therapy and wellness. And I noticed that if I haven't had a trip outdoors for a while, I do start to, crave it. And that's something that I really look forward to. We're going to be wild camping here later tonight. So it's just that sense of freedom, and there's no negative consequences attached to experiences like these. So I never really talked too much about my sober journey. When I hit, I think it was 9 months alcohol free, I shared a milestone. It was like a quick Instagram post when I was traveling. And then I think I did a year in 2 years, but the post was always like very just short and sweet, like feeling the best I've ever felt, you know, really enjoying alcohol free life. And that was pretty much it. And during the pandemic, obviously it was a strange and difficult time for a lot of people. I wanted to go into more detail about my sobriety because I noticed that, you know, a lot of people were struggling with the mental health at the time. So I worked with a photographer and told a sober story over a carousel on Instagram, and the post performed really well, and it made me think that people actually like my photos because I'd never seen that level of engagement before. But I think it just goes to show that when you're humanizing a message and you're passionate about something, like, people are really interested. And that post ended up with nearly 500 bookmarks for people to save and reread it. And I received lots of messages from strangers telling me that it had inspired them to think about their relationship with alcohol. And there was a couple of people who had been, you know, dependent on alcohol their whole life and said that my sober story had inspired them to stop drinking. So it got me thinking, and this would have been in January 2021. And I remember just having an urge to build a brand, and I'd been wanting to do that for a while anyway, because, you know, I work freelance as a creative, but a lot of my work has been working for other brands, and I've always just wanted to build something myself. So after about 18 months of securing the trademark, like building the brand, I launched Arclett in December 2022, just in line for Dry January in 2023. And it was a way for me to combine my lived experience of alcohol, which is 10 years now, my professional experience of alcohol. So I spent almost 15 years working in drug and alcohol treatment, and then also my creative direction. So if you think of like a Venn diagram, and it kind of, Arclett's almost like my inspiration, because it would never have been possible if I'd carried on drinking, because I wouldn't have had the motivation, the discipline, the drive to really try and kick on and take more risks and back myself more with my creative journey. And it all just seems to come together really at the perfect time. So my daughter, like I say, Arwen was born in the March, and then Arclett was born at the end of the year, and we're about to turn 2.5 years old. And when people ask what Arclett is, in a nutshell, we deliver alcohol prevention to the community. It's sober inspiration. Alcohol prevention is the same thing as sober inspiration, but alcohol prevention traditionally has always been that negatives about alcohol. So know your limits, don't drink and drive, you know, drink under 14 units. A lot of it is blanket guidelines that don't resonate for everyone. And I think it's important to say as well that when I started working in drug and alcohol treatments, the only way you would get sober inspiration was if you maybe bought a book, or watched a film, or, you know, sat in a group. Whereas now we obviously have social media, and we can make such a lasting impact on people's lives and actually be giving something back to people that they're looking forward to try and make like a tangible difference. So Arclett's something I'm very passionate about. We've welcomed a couple of volunteers recently. We're doing a lot of work with in the third sector with drug and alcohol charities. We're trying to detach ourselves from that space as well, intentionally, because we deliver prevention. So we're not a substitute for professional support or therapy or counselling. But there's a lot of people out there, especially in the UK at the moment, who are low to increase in risk with alcohol and face challenges. In fact, people who don't drink alcohol, like myself, still face challenges in that you can feel excluded, you can experience sober shaming and peer pressure. And in the UK, 94% of the UK population aren't high risk or dependent on alcohol anyway. So that's 6% who are high risk dependent. There's charities out there to support them. But I feel like there's a lack of a national scale initiative out there at the moment that is delivering alcohol prevention in the way that we are. With Arclett, we have like an always on approach, and we're quite different in the sense that we're promoting an alcohol-free lifestyle. Our niche is obviously trying to inspire sober curiosity through the outdoors, and that's because that's where my passion comes from. I swapped bars for the outdoors, and now my weekends are spent outdoors. So you'll notice that there's like a theme running right the way through our content, that it's all nature-based, it's all outdoors, and that's to try and make people feel calm, encourage them to get out, and remind people actually, that if you are wanting to improve your relationship with alcohol, there's a much wider community out there of people who are doing the same things. Run clubs are on trend, wild swimming's on trend, yoga's taken off over the past 10 years. Like, we're in a very different place to where we were when I was younger, but there's still definitely a need to justify your decision not to drink, and that's what we're really trying to change. We're trying to change the why don't you drink, and for it to be an empowering choice rather than a negative consequence, because everybody's relationship with alcohol is different. One of the things I'm most proud of is having set up a community where we are making a tangible difference to people's lives. And whenever I see people reach out via DM or message and say that we're helping them or inspiring them to improve their relationship with alcohol, because that really feels like a full circle moment for me, because Jack Osborne was my inspiration when I stopped drinking, because he was living a sober lifestyle and doing all of this cool stuff that I wanted to do. And when people would say to me, oh, you're boring for not drinking or whatever, I'd always point to Jack Osborne and say, well, look at the kind of lifestyle that he's living. And it's important that I can be that person for someone else, or Arclett can be that community for someone else, because it can be quite lonely, and I've had to distance myself from negativity and remove certain people from my life because they've been very negative towards my decision to abstain. And maybe at first I took that quite personally, but over the years I've realised that if you're trying to improve your life for the better, then surely your friends should be supportive, and if they're not, maybe they're not the best people for you. I think I'm really proud as well of just following my intuition, because it was an unpopular decision when I was younger and I didn't know anybody else who didn't drink, and it would have been very easy to get caught up in that drinking lifestyle or that drinking culture. Like, the easy option was to do what everyone else was doing and the default and continue drinking, but I've done something thinking that my older self would thank me for it, and I have. Like, I now feel much happier, and I always say my life is in a million times better now I don't drink, and it's not about being better than anyone else, it's just about being better than the previous version of me. But my life is 10 to 20% better than it was than when I drank, because I have 10 to 20% more energy, more time, more motivation, more money, and more presence, and I have less regrets as well. So if you can do something to improve your life, even by like 1 to 2%, is that not worth it? And removing alcohol from my life has given me so many positives, and I am genuinely happier than I was when I was drinking. And I always say life's complicated and hard enough without a hangover. Being a parent, the amount of times we've been like sick as a family, and it's horrible. But I'm not bringing any of that, self-infliction on myself through, late nights and partying and, waking up and thinking, oh, like, why have I spent all this money? Or like, I feel awful, or, other people are going out and doing something enjoyable, but I'm stuck in bed hungover. If you're wanting to improve your relationship with alcohol, just remember there is a large community of people wanting to do the same. And sober curiosity isn't always linear. It took me a couple of years of navigating that, 3-4 months without drinking, and then dreading a night out because I dread the hangover, having the hangover and say I'm never drinking again, and maybe getting peer pressured into drinking again. It took me a couple of years and that, sober shaming in Australia, to get to the point where I was ready to fully commit. So everyone's experience with alcohol is different. We've all got different tolerances. We've all had a different relationship with it over the years. So it's not a one size fits all, but we're just trying to normalise the choice to be alcohol free. And that's why I say I'm not anti-alcohol, I'm pro-choice. And it's really important to just be that voice in the community and try and humanise the message about sobriety. And that's why I really wanted to do this video, because people like people. And Jack Osborne was my inspiration when I used to read his sober milestones, and people say to me that they're inspired by my sober journey. So I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't excited for my 10-year milestone, because it is obviously a big one. It's been a long one coming. I don't know if I'll carry on celebrating my milestones, because I don't drink anymore. And people sometimes say, well, why would you share your milestone if you're not dependent? But it's that stigma. It's having to justify to people why you're not drinking, and that's unique to alcohol. It doesn't happen with any other drug in the world. And I've been on nights out with people where I've heard people say, oh, here's Mr. I don't drink, and being like really condescending with me. And I've never matched and mirrored that. I've always just kind of, let it go, or not really reacted to it. But it is a genuine barrier for people stopping drinking alcohol, and it's just the choice at the end of the day. Like I say, if my friends are going on a night out and they're drinking, like, good for them. If that's what a good time means for them, then cool. I'm not going to sit there and judge them or be resentful, but, you know, please let other people who aren't drinking just be respectful. So there's two sides to this answer, and the first one is that if you feel like you physically can't stop drinking, then it's obviously very important that you seek immediate help, and stopping suddenly can be dangerous. There's amazing free support out there if you need it. One of the problems is that if you're to go and walk into a drug and alcohol charity and you fit underneath the Odyssey tool, you won't be accepted. You'll often be turned away, and you might be signposted somewhere else. And I think that shows the problem in that it's not the amount of alcohol we drink, it's the impact the alcohol has on us. So when I drank, like I was saying before, I often drank less than some of my friends. I wouldn't always get involved in shots, but the consequences for me were worse. And I've had so many conversations with people where they've said, oh, I've only had, one pint or one glass of wine, and I've woke up the next day with raging anxiety. So it's more about thinking about how that alcohol impacts us and getting away from blanket guidelines that were set up in 2016 and realising that any level of alcohol can be harmful. And one of the things that we do with Arclett is we never focus on the negatives of alcohol, because to me that doesn't make sense. Our bodies tell us that, through a hangover, that alcohol isn't the best thing for us and to take it easy. I believe for a lot of people the biggest barrier is stigma, and we actually ran a community poll and asked what was the biggest barrier to improving your relationship with alcohol, the cravings towards alcohol or stigma, and stigma was voted number one. And that's because sobriety has never been visible or attractive, and I'm trying to make it visible through shining a spotlight on Low and No Alcohol, Dry January, the Sober Curious movement and our community. And for it being attractive, that's where my photography and creative direction comes in too, because I'm trying to show a sober lifestyle that people are, the friends are going out every weekend and they're at home, like reminding people actually there's so many places in the UK that you can go and explore and have fun, and there's a community out there, an active community of people who are wanting to do the same thing as you. What I'd say as well is just try and find something that you love. It might be going back to the things that you enjoyed when you were younger. When I was in school, I was always very creative, but I was told that you couldn't succeed as a creative. And the role of a photographer has changed so much recently, because we now have content creators. A lot of jobs now didn't exist when I was in school, and it's about finding something that you love. And I loved fitness because I wasn't that academic in school. But fitness was the first time in my life I got out exactly what I put in. It was tangible. If I looked after my diet and my nutrition and trained consistently, I got fitter and stronger, and that gave me so much confidence. And photography as well, that's something that is within me. I'm a creative person. Like, just going out, taking photos, it makes me be present. It's taken me to some amazing places. I was lucky enough to work in Switzerland a couple of years ago on a global tourism campaign, and it's just a sign of when I go all in on something, I've got the confidence that I just back myself more. And I think that's partly because of the no alcohol challenge as well. I've committed to never drinking again. And it's that confidence knowing that I can navigate sober shame and stigma, the peer pressure to drinking, and I've stayed true to my beliefs. I've stuck with what I wanted to do. And that's given me a lot of confidence. And it was the gym and photography, finding two things that I really wanted to do that replaced the high with alcohol and gave me a lot of confidence. One of the things that you can do as well is, rather than focus on the negatives of alcohol, you can focus on the tangible benefits of not drinking. And for my 9-year sober milestone, I actually asked AI to calculate what I've saved over the past 9 years from not drinking alcohol. And I've avoided, or at the time I'd avoided 1.3 million empty calories. I'd not spent over 40 grand. It wasn't adjusted for inflation. It didn't include things like nights out, entrance fees to nights out, Ubers, maybe new clothes and things like that. It was just strictly on the amount of alcohol that I was drinking. And I avoided 720 hangovers in 9 years. And that's nearly 2 years, or around 2 years, that I would have spent in bed hungover, that I've avoided because I don't drink anymore. But to think that I've avoided, it will have been over 720 hangovers over that time period. think of all like the productivity and the clarity that I've gained since that. It's about the consequences. For me, what really helped me understand my relationship with alcohol was, rather than asking, am I drinking within these guidelines or under this unit threshold, it was a very simple question: can I drink without consequences? And the answer was always no. And the next question was, are the consequences worth it? And the answer was always no. For some people, the consequences might be worth it, or it might be minimal, and that's fine. But for me, the consequences weren't worth it, and that was a far healthier way of me looking at my relationship with alcohol and trying to understand it, instead of just relying on rock bottom moments, crisis, labels. And it's just about the consequences. And for me, waking up pretty much every weekend and having a day written off or feeling like less than 50% of my normal self because I've been on a night out, it's just not worth it. I wasn't someone who would wake up and think, oh, what did I do last night? It was more just about, what am I missing out on today, and is this my life now? I just work every weekend and then get drunk with my friends and do the same thing on repeat. And when I go on holidays, it's the same thing. I spend the whole time drunk, just going to bars and not really experiencing anything else.